Okay, I think we're ready to get started here. We're recording, and I just have to turn off the annoying alarm chime. There we go. Okay, very good. Welcome everyone to the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group for Wednesday, January 23rd, 2019. My name is Rick Crammond. I'm the host today, as every day in the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group for the last 5 years or so. And let me just check my systems here and make sure everything's connected the way it's supposed to be. Okay, I think we're good. All right. So far, so good, as they say. Yeah, I usually just start my video and say hello to begin here, so allow me to do that. Run. All right, there I am. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group once again. Seems like it's always Wednesday, just like that, and then a couple of days go by and it's Wednesday again. Here we are.
Tuesday for you.
Well, it is still Tuesday for the next couple of hours here on the west coast of Canada. It's true. Let me just get my camera locked in here. It's getting blurry. Take the auto off and something like that. Try to. It's too much light. Oh, I need a little background light, I guess is what it is. Oh, well. Close enough for a brief hello. And I always ask at this point if anyone has any projects or things they'd like to present, questions or ideas, or anything else they've noticed in the last part of our stay on this planet. Checking here if there's anything.
You said it. Are we staying here or are we going elsewhere? That's a good question.
Well, and who is we? Can we speak for all of humanity? I don't know about that, because definitely there's lots of people that don't want to go to space in any which way. They don't see any reason to go to space. They quite like Earth, and maybe they like their farm and what they're doing, or their apartment and what they're doing, and they're quite happy with being on planet Earth. Or unhappy, but just not willing to take a chance with space, I guess. For me, it's easy because I remember since I was able to read a picture book that I wanted to be a spaceman. I was all into space and knew all about the planets and everything else before I even got to grade school. So that was sort of my big thing when I was young. But I never actively pursued that in terms of, you know, my later teen and 20s and so on. I wasn't really interested in going to space in a rocket that had fire shooting out the back of it. It just didn't quite seem like a good idea somehow. And I envisioned when I was young that things would change. You know, there was rumors of in the late 50s, mid and late 50s, there was talk about anti-gravity devices, and gravity was one of the key features that were supposed to be solved by the time we get into the 60s and especially the 70s. And indeed, it may have been solved, but it's also been covered up in many ways, so that if it is out there and solved and available, it's sure not made for the regular public to see at this point in time. Perhaps soon we will.
Just about the same here. Eh? We've got similar age and similar thoughts and similar way of living, I think.
Here being...
myself, I mean.
Pardon me?
Myself, I mean.
Yeah,
way of upbringing and what have you.
In South America.
Yep. Well, you were gold panning sometime in California, was it?
Yeah, I did some gold panning in California, and then I had a couple of claims in British Columbia, up in the west coast of Canada as well. And that was a lot of fun. I enjoy that pastime, but I haven't been out in quite a while. I actually became the, strangely enough, the Tri-County Gold Country gold panning champion in the senior category back in 1982.
Oh, good.
Northern California. I just happened to wander in and borrowed $2 for the entry fee, and ended up winning the entire gold panning championship for that year. So that was kind of interesting. But that was a different life and got me to where I am now in one way or another. It's a very important part of my life, where I met my wife and so on and so forth. But that was long ago and far away. So you also have gold prospecting in your history, John?
No, I didn't do that. Just went to school, and we had the polio problem here in 1955, so we had to go into not the wilds, but in what we call the camp here. We had a weekend place. Ended up living on a horse, practically, horse riding continually for quite a few years.
Mm. All right, well, let's get on here with what the topic usually is, which is something to do with Keshe plasma reactors, obviously, or any topic that's relatively close to that target. We do go somewhat astray here from time to time, but we do try to bring things back to plasma, because that is actually the key to the inner workings of the universe, perhaps. One key, one way to approach it. So, go ahead, John.
Have you seen or looked into the copper discs for reflectors? I imagine so. You could.
Well, I put the ad up for it into Facebook and so on. And
yeah,
we have had a couple of instances of people making nano-coated mirror discs and showing them in this group. And I was trying to remember who did that. Not sure if it was
Why do they consider a mirror? You get a special color or something?
Well, the one that I saw that was produced was round, about the size of a CD or so, and it was made out of copper and nano-coated, but it had multiple nano-coatings, and it was polished like between nano-coatings to smooth the layers, I guess you might say, and he used, I think before it was even nano-coated, he used successive layers of, or successive grades rather, of sandpaper. So you start out at, say, a 400 grade, and then go to 600, 1,000, then 2,000, and end up at 4,000 or 6,000 grade sandpaper. And that produces a polished surface on the copper. And then when it's nano-coated, if you do it properly, it'll be a really hard coating, not just a soft, fluffy coating. So it wouldn't be a fire type nano-coating. I think it was, pretty sure it was with a caustic process, but polished again between each nano layering process. And it gave like a black mirror finish to this copper disc. It was quite impressive. In fact, I've got a sheet of copper over here that I plan on doing something similar to. Oops, just a minute while I get my headphones back in place here. But it's a nice shiny piece of copper, and the idea is to have discs cut out. This is, it's not real thin. I mean, it can sort of support its own weight. Got a great sound to it. And it's got a layer of plastic film on it to keep it shiny. So this would be great. For example, if you could get, I plan on getting the disc cut with a water jet process, which would give me a nice exact disc. And that way I won't have to post-process it or handle it. And it can actually be cut while this plastic wrap is still on the surface. And then once that's revealed, it'll be a super smooth, shiny copper plate. And then I can nano coat it from there and do the polishing process and produce some pretty nice nano coated discs, I think. But what they did in Austria is the nano coating process that they did is supposed to take 2 to 3 months of work. lots of special nano coating with special ganzas and so on, different combinations, and multiple layers, multiple times to get everything just right to what they say, compress the layers. So that's why it's quite expensive. We're looking at 1,000 euros for 2 discs. So it's for those that are serious about using such devices for their experiments and different ways they can be used as are outlined on the website.
Good morning. May I say something?
Yes. Hi, Christian.
Hello. Yes, I asked Klaus how exactly he did this with the discs, because we want to build some here. And several things he already said. And he said it's so much more knowledge in it that he would have to give a workshop. Otherwise, we would not easily reach this level of discs that he produced there. He said that since 5 years, one of his guys working there is working on these disks, and there's a lot more than we think. What we already know is he uses, when nano coating, he uses all for ganses and amino acids in the coating fluid. And yes, what you already said, when polishing, the nano layer is being compressed, destroyed in a way. So the gaps in between are pressed together again. And this process has to be done very often. And then they are checking whether it is strong enough, the effect of it. But there seems to be more. I just want to add it here, because if you expect just several time nano coating will do it, I think it's not that easy, maybe. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for the input. I just wanted to show the actual website with that. Bear with me here. I think that'll do it. Okay, so this is the stop the video, might be better. The Keshe Foundation store website, and this is what's called the plasma field mirrors. And you can see the larger picture. And it's a little hard to see because they're inside these plastic pouches that have some printing on them and so on, and they've got little sort of stripes in the pouches, so it's hard to see the discs themselves. But the pouches are basically to keep your hands off the discs and keep them functioning with their nano coating and whatnot. So you can get the idea of how they might be used. And Klaus also, in the 259th Knowledge Seekers Workshop, he demonstrates and shows how these work. And there's some other details there on the website. So that's under store product mirrors. I think it's new released products. Yeah. On the new released products page. Plasma field mirrors. Interesting idea. I'm not sure, Jedi, what you would mean by an alchemical process or an atomic process for producing a mirror surface on the copper. He says we're dealing with nanometric orders of magnitude, so sandpaper would create canyons and is not the best way to obtain a smooth surfaces. Alchemical shall meet the molecular size texture. Atomic shall meet atomic texture. Well, how do you do those on a copper plate that's already shiny to start with? That would be my question. Okay.
Hello,
well,
good morning.
Oh, hi.
Yes, hi. It's if you are using sandpaper to start with, you create canyons. You are scratching the surface. From a nanometric point of view,
That's better.
it's huge. So you are scratching the surface.
Yes,
the effect.
This is already scratched. You look at it closely, you'll see it's like the canyons all over the place. So the idea of the multiple the multiple sandpaper up to 6,000 grade is so fine that it would be virtually a mere finish to our eyes.
Yes, it is a possibility to start with, but there would be an underlying structure already there that has to be filled up so that you create a flat surface to start with. So you have two different ways of doing the same kind of polishing, which are the alchemical. And so we're going into acids and substances that you add to the transformation. And that will create a layer upon the other continuously that is going to be really very smooth. So it's filling up the gaps, and it's working with a specific order of magnitude within that field, within that size. And so it's a molecular kind of transmutation, which is affecting atoms, of course. It's building molecular. And then you have the third kind, which is only atomic. So if you could use only fields, so let's say that we are not using no alchemical substance, only fields. So it's just floating in the air and in space, and you are creating this kind of polishing. And there you will produce a texture which is nano-atomic. And so it's about, let's say now we reached something like 15 nanometers size. And that would be quasi-crystalline. So that is what research is going towards nowadays. That would be very, very precise. So a specific length and polishing that is that can be used to match the exact frequency. And so then you use that kind of mirror, let's say mirror, or antenna. It depends what you want to do with it. To reach a specific frequency. And because these antennas, in so many ways, they work within that specific kind of range, then it shall be something like 2000 terahertz, because it matches the size of the waves we are going to capture. It's like using 11 meters antenna and then using lambda 4, or in this case we are using it matches the size of a CD, but within this smooth surface we have a quasi-crystalline structure that in the case of sandpaper it shall be let's say messed up by plenty of different textures, patterns that are arranged in various and different ways. It shall not be of the same kind. There could be 20,000 different layers, one on top of the other. But if you go alchemical and molecular, it shall be organic. So the quasi-crystalline structures shall not be...
How do you do the nano-coating with the alchemical and atomic process? You're talking about
we do it
proper smooth to start with, but how do you do the nano-coating to add the thousands or whatever number of layers of nano-coating that actually contains the plasma and that get polished?
We all practice this. We all did it with the alchemical process. But to start with, it was 3 days, 9 days altogether. and so, well, you could do this kind of continue the process for a couple of months, 4 months, and see what happens. So that is obtaining 40,000 layers. And if you, of course, if you bend the mirror.
Sorry, do you mean using caustic to create the nano coating?
Yes, the process has to go on, has to carry on quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that it will, the disc would be really smooth, and the layers would reach something like, I guess I reached 200,000, but even more, because I left them there for a very long time. And so that is the alchemical way. Then if you orientate the flux by using magnetic fields or sound, they shall follow all the structure shall follow the imprinting, let's say, dimension of the positioning, and that would be the next step. So going without using caustic, without using water, just by applying fields. So it would be magnetic, it would be sound or light, and you can do it the same thing. And that is the way you could build this kind of discs. The third kind of work you can do on them. We are practicing the first level. The first level is alchemical, and we know what they are capable of doing. I have been, during the process of creating some quasi-crystals on the surface of copper, nano-coated copper. And so I studied what happens. And it matches this explanation very, very well. So I could prove that the different arrangement, position of the structure is there. And there are sometimes 20, 30, 40 different kinds of patterns, one within the other, because we are not reasoning in by bidimensional surface, because when we speak about a mirror, it's flat, and here we have three-dimensional, because we are going towards nanometric. So there is a huge space. There are gaps in between. We do not see them because our order of magnitude doesn't allow us to enter. But if you use a microscope, you find out that there is a pattern, and there are various patterns at the same time. Whilst you are expanding the image, so you're zooming in, you find different textures that are there. So it's not considering only a flat surface and the position of the layer that you can see with your eyes. You have to enter the matter state, and you shall see that there are many quasi-crystal structures taking place, and all of them shall produce the visual kind of effect you have. That to start with, it is a sponge kind of structure. It's like the bone. And I think that some of you have seen these kind of floating bits of dark material or the plates that you have used, they were in some way there were dots on them, or a spongy kind of substance, which was not really GANs, because it was of a different color. It was not a white GANs, for example, or CO2. It was a dark kind of texture with this spongy feeling or touch. And there you have the a visualization like zooming in. So it's telling you that this is happening at a very, very low level in the matter state. But from our point of view, we have a sponge and it's not really precise. So a frequency would enter that structure and then would be sucked in, and so that that's why it's capturing it, and it has no possibility to escape, or it's disturbing the field. This is when we are using this kind of sponge. But once you reach, let's say, perfection, let's say we're going alchemical, and then we move to atomic, then that would be a pure quasi-crystal, and you could use it as a artificial memory, which is not flat anymore. In nanometric dimension, you obtain a sphere or a cube, and you would have a memory placed wherever you want in that cube. So thousands of terabytes. And that is because the structure being perfect, precise, then you could, from a electromagnetic point of view, work with the charges. It's something research is doing. We happen to see it, the effect, and according to the strength of the field. But here we are talking about a passive system. It's not an active one. It's passive. So it's interacting. We saw that Klaus moved the discs towards the microphone, and then something happens. This is near field communication. We all know this. And in fact, it was canceling some frequencies, and it was sending back part of them, transformed to a higher degree, so it's over unity in some way, disturbing the flux, and so creating a blackout or a white kind of sound. It's like a waterfall, a white noise, which is a scalar noise. It's kind of background. So that antenna, the spongy kind of structure, that antenna is in fact sending millions of frequencies at the same time in a scalar way. So we have three kinds of mirrors to produce. If we get better in this kind of work and just taking care of a technology that is of a higher order. We have been doing it with caustic. That would be 1800. Nowadays, we could do it by using light, sound, magnetic flux. That is a way to do it nowadays. No need to use water to use alchemical.
Well, I'd be interested to see the results of that kind of technique, whether it produces a black nano coating or what does it look like?
It's most of the time it shall be black, because we are starting with a black nano coated copper. So we are feeding it with the first layers. It's like producing rubies or diamonds or crystals. You put the seeds, and then if you give the specific quantity of ingredients, and so if you feed the crystal, then it shall grow. And this is the way we obtain the rubies we use in our CD readers. They are synthetic ones. I think it was 1756 or something like this. The alchemist that made them. So it's something that we all know at this point.
Well, this is one that we do know that came from Thomas. He was the one that showed this. I think, well, somewhere around the 160th Knowledge Seekers Workshop. And you can see here, this is the excerpt from the workshop, and it shows a picture of it. Let me just read. Apparently, I said in the workshop, I have a video that came up with the Plasma Reactor group last night. It is from Thomas from Poland. He has a couple of copper discs that he has nano-coated in a special way. He talks about how he uses them to detect fields and how he teaches people to sense fields through using these copper discs. I thought you might be able to critique and comment on whether this is a valid technique or how he might be able to improve what he's doing. It's about 8 minutes. I thought it was quite interesting and so on. And I don't have that video right here, but I've got the picture from the video. Says it's 9 centimeters by 1 millimeter thickness, not too heavy, and fits comfortably in the hand and is easy to hold. These are under construction. When it is fully ready, it is a black mirror. The idea is to nano-coat with caustic soda. After they are nano-coated, you polish them with fine sanding paper, 1500. The idea came from John Dee, the alchemist from here in London, and some artifacts from North America, a certain stone. After you polish them, you need to nano-coat again because probably you will destroy the nano-coating on the edges. This one has scratches, so I need to nano-coat again. Then you actually create the best mirror, and it is graphene, a very strange thing. The graphene behaves in a different way with different properties, and this is my discovery, the different properties of graphene. I asked, where do you get the graphene from? And Thomas says, just the caustic soda is normal. I say, normally you wouldn't get graphene, you would have copper oxide. And he says, sorry, that's what I mean, copper oxide, not graphene. And I mentioned you can get graphene on copper, but it's a special process with the plastic and so on. And I think Mr. Keshe says you can get to graphene on copper. And he says sometimes you can do this on plain copper. We've seen that in spectrography, and it's very unusual. And then I mentioned it does depend on the container and type of plastic as the container of the container, as well as the temperature. Mr. Keshe says more or less, and it depends what is in the environment. We have done this process. And I mentioned you used to use the ground necks of the cola bottles as the source of the extra carbon. And Mr. Keshe says, yeah, it depends on what it is. And he goes on to talk about that. And he does, well, maybe I should read this just so we have it down here, since we are sort of discussing this in technical detail. So Mr. Keshe says, yeah, it depends on what it is. If you look at graphene, the behavior of it can be replicated in other materials. It's not that difficult to see the structure and work and behavior of the graphene and the copper. The interesting thing is what is interacting between the layers. We don't have, in most cases, the caustic in the plastic, and only the pure, let's say, nanocopper. Because of the condition inside, you have impurity spacing or other materials in the environment. It is very much like having the water in the areas in the middle of the earth. So when we talk about the nano layers of copper on materials, let's say there are 50,000 layers, not all of them are copper. In between, you'll likely have zinc and carbon. In the spectroscopy from Belgium Institute, where all our problems started because it's a terrorist organization, using the simple materials, they said we had gamma sources. They said we had gamma sources in their ignorance. The change in the copper was that it was showing itself partially to be of graphene behavior, while at the same time zinc, carbon, graphene, sp3, and sp2 were amongst the layers of the nanolayers. It is not that it is pure and everything is carbon. You have these plasmatic magnetic fields among these spaces of the nanolayers, and some of the effect you can show in the copper also. Carry on, please. So the video says after 7,000 layers, you can see the mirror effect on the copper. It is a nice mirror. And it goes on to say the basic concept is that every finger on the hand is responsible for some part of the brain. The concept is to hold the copper rings with all 5 fingers. You'll feel the magnetic gravitational pressure between them if you hold them facing each other. They feel like magnets in your hands. You can feel the fields pushing. If you want to feel attraction, then you do that with your imagination. This is a very basic educational tool. When I have someone with a problem with feeling and it feels like wood, so then to get the feeling, you're going to bring the mirrors to the person. After a few minutes or after a second session, people will feel the magnetic gravitational. There's no question of whether energy exists or doesn't exist. You feel this in a very strong way. If you push energy across your hands, it is like a small shock. You can put these on either side of the knees. You feel the pressure, expansion, and attraction. It's a lot of work and a very heavy job polishing them. For anyone who comes to me to ask about the KF and the energy after a few seconds using the mirrors, they understand what we are talking about with plasma energy. It is all energy. It's a perfect educational tool and saves me many hours explaining to people how the fields work, what the fields are, etc. This helps people come to find out more about the MagRav system. The spheres solve a lot of problems with questions about the magnetic gravitational energy. I call them the mirror of the soul. The Mayans and alchemists used obsidian in the same way hundreds of years ago. The stone was polished and used this way. Let me see how much further this goes on here. It does go on for a couple more pages here. So let me find it again. Let me get the link for that. There it is. Okay, I'll try to put that in the chat here.
Yeah, is this a transcription of one of the teachings?
Yeah, it's just comes through as a Google search, so I have to find a way to, because it's a PDF or a doc rather. Let's see, let's try it differently. Google thing, so I'll try it again in the chat here. See if, whoops. Okay, you can try that link in the chat there. I'll put it in the live stream as well. Not sure if that goes through. It didn't post in the live stream properly, for example. Does it work for anybody? Have they tried clicking on that link? Does it download a document? It won't post in live stream. I don't know if it works yet for the chat here. You can look it up by searching in Google for 160th Knowledge Seekers Workshop. It's actually from plasmaproduction.org.
Yes, it works. It's a doc.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
Direct link.
Okay. So maybe I can read just a little bit further in this because it is interesting. It's on topic for this particular topic. So after he talks about the stone was polished and used that way, Mr. Keshe says it's very interesting. And I say it's almost like an amplifier for the hands. For most people, their hands are the most sensitive part for feeling the fields or for sensing the fields. Mr. Keshe says the reason for our hands is that our fingers are like tentacles into the energy of the universe. Each of our hands has 5 fingers. At the end of each finger is one line of connection to the universal energy. So if you have one finger, it has one strength. The shape of our fingers and toes and the structure of the muscle tissue and the lines you see on your hands absorb and give different types of energy from the universe. So you receive 5 times more energy when you have 5 fingers. Look at the leaves of coriander and parsley. Look at the number of tips on coriander leaves. There is more energy absorbed because there are more lines of connection. So when you say our hand is a good way to measure and is stronger, is because we have this connection with the atmospheric part. And he goes on to say our hands are on our emotional part. Our feet are on our physical part. Toes are small and short because the point of receiving energy from the earth is direct. With our hands, we absorb energy from what is in the atmosphere and part of our life. The lung and the heart have to do with our emotional part, which has to do with our brain part, which has to do with the gaseous part of the atmospheric part of this planet. Our hands are part of the same, but they have become multitasking to provide us with grabbing capability of physical things. But at the same time, the fingertips are the feeders into what we receive. The behavior of the 4-legged animals is different than those who are upright and absorb energy from the atmospheric conditions. This is why you see the monkeys, chimpanzees, and the human race behaving intellectually different because we feed from two levels with the energy absorption. Animals are four-legged and they are all connected mainly with the energy that comes from the earth. With our being upright, we get energy from the earth, which is a physical part of the existence, through our feet. We get the gaseous energy from the atmosphere through our hands, and this is our emotion. This is why we use our hands in showing emotion so easily. It is part of the way that we receive energy. This is something I've emphasized in some of the teaching, which is the way our bodies in time and through evolution have come to change the way we walk upright. We have gained advantage by being able to absorb multi-layer energy. Okay, it goes on to explain about that in some more detail, about the hair on our bodies and so on. Okay, so he goes on to say, do we receive different energy with gray hair or white hair? Or do we give different energy from our brains? Of course we do. Now we understand this, and we have to add to the knowledge that we have to understand more about this. So this is what is important. You have to see that when you look at the picture, you'll see the fingers are holding the copper circles, so you are adding to the reception of the fields. And mono energy, now with the fingers holding these plates as they are, you are dictating what energy is absorbed. You can make these copper circle plates concave and hold them in your hands. Would you see a different kind of light between them because you are concaving the energy and it will reflect back to each of them? These are flat ones. Make them concave and see how you create light. And I mentioned, what if the plates were very close together and maybe even vacuumed between them? So Keshe says, yes, we have to understand the reality of the interaction. I explain in many cases of the interaction of the material with the fields because the materials have their own field of strength. The process is to understand more and add to the knowledge. We need to complete the understanding with the open mind of understanding the totality. Would the condition change if we create or touch the plates with only 3 fingers? Would the energy field be the gap in the distance and the same strength? This is what we have to understand in tests and teachings like this that bring us openness to new understanding is the key to this technology. The minute you reject it means you have gotten to the point of not understanding the totality. All right, well, that's some good information there.
We could have another way to polish them, which is the process we use to obtain astronomical lenses, which are perfect lenses. That is another way to polish them.
And what remind us what process gets used for that? I know there's one process with
water. Most of it is water.
Pardon me?
It's using water.
Water. Mm-hmm.
Water. And usually, well, they obtain in different ways, but they melt it and then they pour it. And then it's like using water to polish it. It's like polishing stones. You could do this with nano-materials within a container that is turning around very, very slowly. And so in 1 month, you obtain a wonderful stone, which is really smooth.
What about using 2 plates and having some GANs in between as the sort of grinding compound, you might say, between the two plates. Just,
that would work. That would work. It's the tiniest dust you can produce. It will dictate the size of the lines of the pattern. But because it is turning for months within water, then these lines they tend to disappear. It's like when we use the CRT screens, the old kind of cathodic tubes, and the electrons, the light, was let's say there was a cannon that was shooting it on this glass surface, and we obtain sublimation, it's called. So we could see kind of atomic light in the colors. It was much better than using pixels because it was an atomic process. And this sublimation is used even in printing to fill up the gaps between JPEG images. So if you have a professional way to print a photograph, you shall sublimate it. So you're not talking about 1.5 billion colors, but you are in fact, by using synergy, working with an infinite numbers of them, or gradients, but these gradients are not calculated as we do in a digital way. They are created by sublimation. So that would be the consequence of smoothing the surface of the disk by polishing it for 2 months continuously in a kind of container where it floats, and all this dust is just caressing it slowly, continuously. And that would still be a matter state kind of mirror. Not yet.
Sorry.
Yes.
Maybe you could use, like they make the mirrors on the glass floating on mercury. You polish the plates on the mercury surface for a long time. That maybe would do the work also. Instead of having the hard surface down below and the liquid on top or whatever, have the liquid mercury down below and the plate floating on top and moving it around.
Don't know if that would work. The mercury might stick to the copper, actually. That's an idea.
Well, there could be some other substance. The liquid substance down below and the copper floating on top and polishing.
Marius, I see you have your microphone open. Did you want to speak there as well? Not hearing. Okay, it's closed now.
Yes, I remember mercury and graphene. Something really strange happens. So it starts running everywhere. So it's like mercury is accelerated if you had graphene. So it could be another way to polish this kind of instrument by using these two ingredients and not water. and some sort of guns.
Yeah, the mercury. Yeah, the mercury atoms would be the grinding stone.
Yes, and they would give the atomic size of it. Probably they would dictate the kind of light that is coming off the surface of the mirror. So every kind of different dust or atomic process would create a specific light.
Yes, and Mr. Keshe suggested a slight concave surface to each of them would concentrate and perhaps create a special light effect. So that's an idea as well. And the question came up from Alper, what are we mirroring? What is it that feels like, they feel like magnets in your hands, it says here. You can feel the magnetic gravitational pressure between them if you hold them facing each other. You can feel the fields pushing.
In that case, you're feeling the magnetic, gravitational. You capture waves of many different kinds, and so it's.
You mentioned the terahertz, for example, and you could imagine that between the layers, it might be ideal place for a very small wavelength, high frequency signal, let's say, or pulse that might be trapped within the layers of the discs, let's say. So maybe they are actually already a terahertz receiver, transmitter. Maybe that's involved somehow.
That is involved in nanometric technology. These kind of materials and surfaces, or let's say in some ways they use two tubes, and they are magnesium, titanium. They use various kind of patterns, and these little mirrors are already placed inside identification cards and passports and all over the place. They have been introduced in materials, and they are everywhere. Cars, computers, telephones. They are present. So we are using this kind of technology, let's say, starting to understand the principles. But these devices are there, and they answer to the frequency. So they are reachable from the let's say the dominant note, which is the frequency that someone is using to know where all the that kind of device, for example, would be whatever, a telephone, is placed, with no use no use of internal active field. It's an external field that is interacting with that mirror, and so it captures. It's like a radar, the light. And most of what industry has been producing in the last 50 years is it bears this kind of Trojan horses with it. Near field communication is something that we all know. It's up to 12 meters maybe, but there are specific nano materials that interact within 200 kilometers from the antenna. And there was a project, and I shall not say the names, of course, but they produced 2 billion of them, and no cost, and the size is so tiny that you could place them everywhere. And these billions of mirrors are in fact working within a specific range. And the hand in that case is a huge antenna which is placed somewhere and is working on that, it's tuned on that particular note. It is fine tuning. We have obtained mirrors that are messing up the field in some way, because here we produce millions of different frequencies or interact with all of them. So it's a white noise. But usually science goes towards a very precise frequency to dictate and control it. So they're not going the natural way, creating a sponge. They're instrumental.
Yeah, like that's been the sort of the mainstream approach, is to find that main frequency, but it may turn out that the plasma, from a plasmatic point of view, it is a multiplicity of frequencies, a combination of many frequencies depending on your perspective and where you're measuring from and how you're measuring and what you're trying to measure. Could have quite a variance. I notice in the Sapphire project, SAFIRE, they created a plasma chamber and did some experiments inside and so on last year, and had some really interesting results. And they had measurements of, I think I counted 36 types of measurements for their plasma. Everything from temperature to voltages and all these different ion concentrations and the pressures and so on. Every criteria that they could imagine, they recorded on this apparatus. And I thought that was interesting because you can't identify this plasma that, this vacuum chamber plasma they created. You couldn't identify it by just a frequency or just a temperature. Even measuring the temperature is tricky because close to the electrode was only 2,500 degrees Celsius, but an inch or two away from the electrode was another layer that was up to 30,000 degrees Celsius and so on. There was multiple layers to this plasma. So depending on where you measured, you would have a very wide range of temperature measurement. In fact, they completely melted their probe unexpectedly, their titanium tipped probe or whatever, and they completely melted their $4,000 probe on their first probing, not expecting to have such high temperatures in that particular plasma. So suffice to say that it might be difficult to measure what would be the receiving frequency, let's say, of these disks that we see in front of us here. There might be a prime frequency according to the size of the disks or the numbers of layers of nanocoatings and the distance between them and what other doping elements are in there to be spacers for the copper inside the nano layers and so on. So we might have different ways of measuring sort of depending on what our intention is or what we want to use them for.
Yes, I remember when I wrote down a list of 40 different instruments to be used to detect and to understand and to study these kind of plates and to create this experimental laboratory to find out.
Yeah.
And we go unilinear. That is our way. We have been practicing. This is universal. It's going only towards one kind of understanding. It's a concept. It's limited to our instrument. So you find out that nowadays they are using 20 different ways, 30 different ways. So they have 30 values or curves. And this is messing up the concept. And so we say it is difficult. Of course, it is difficult from the point of view of the universal. That's why I'm writing about multiversal. Because if you do not enter a kind of vision that is beyond the three-dimensional one, that is not simple at all. You are sticking to a kind of yes-no environment, and it's present, it's absent, and it's working on this specific frequency. So we have a frequency for each kind of device we are using, and a range within that kind of field that we are studying. But there could be a different behavior at a very high order of magnitude or even a smaller one. So who's studying that, what's happening beyond and below? Apparently no one, but there are scientists that are working above the limits. So that is where real knowledge, the teaching, is when you discover something that is above or below. Then you shall find out that what is above is what is below. Okay, and that is Ouroboros in this ancient teaching we taught. But what's the gradient? You're interested in that particular length, so you shall find it. Now you want to see, you want to make it a color, and so you use an infrared camera, and you have a temperature transformed into a color. And if you want to transform it into a note, you shall see that the frequency is low frequency, let's say 600 nanometers, and red laser would go like this, the vibration. And if you create a green one or a violet one, it's higher up. So it's by studying the spectrum, you obtain informations, the curves, all together. So you are gathering all the lights that are emitted by that kind of atoms that are oscillating. So if they are sending back light, all of them are crystals. And this is what they used to tell us. It's physics, basic physics. So it's crystalline. That's why talking about quantum quasi-crystalline structures now is starting to understand that it is not only linear, it's not universal, it's multiversal at the same time. And that is where it becomes it's more clear. I think it's a way to perceive the fields, to sense the fields, rather than counting the numbers or following the equation to one given solution.
Oh, that's
So
a really good
theories
point.
are going far beyond this limit, and so once you have the theory there and you have a different approach, it's like in ancient Greece, Platonic, or you have a different approach, then sciences follow. And so they build the instruments, and simplicity shall be there once they accept a new point of view. We could never understand what's going to happen next now, because now we are still in the past, according to our future understanding. But this is going to happen just the same. So it does not depend on our pure intention. It depends on the intention of a greater source, a greater field. So at the same time, our intention is a part of it. But we are allowed to meet that conscient understanding only when it matches the right number of frequencies, let's say. So once you have proven that 50 different instruments say something in various ways, but they all say something about a process, then you must be quite certain that this process is taking place, and this understanding, a new understanding, is giving you the opportunity to work with a different way, following a different path. So just imagine practicing architecturally, practicing the structure of a Pentium CPU and building a city following these instructions. We are not even able to imagine that this level of understanding, which is shown inside the CPU, if you transform it into a city, you have no traffic jam. It's working, it's fluid, and everything is there. So architecture is 20 generations late according to the technology we are using in electronics. And that is still something really very flat. We are starting to build layers now, and so it's like skyscrapers. But it's a different way. They should talk to each other. I think the sciences have been really isolated. That is when this vision, it is unlinear. It's wrong. You must not isolate. It's by adding informations that you reach. And then you start to respect, of course, because you're not considering only one entity as the controller, the owner, that one that dictates. This concept is the ancient one. Let it go. It's the interaction of all the fields. Our conscience is limited. Our understanding is limited from a spiritual point of view. So our instruments are limited. Once you work together, so I would ask, it's like Indians, the eagle, the spirit, the horse. You have to, the tree, you have to participate. Ask them. There is one of those huge, immense radars that is working, is protecting Europe, for example. It's just spinning around, and it spans over 500 kilometers. 400 kilometers away, flies every 10 seconds They fly in the air, and then they go back to the plant. Someone is blowing something upon them, and they feel it. And they are disturbed 400 kilometers away. Just ask flies. They don't last long. It's 2 days lifespan. That's all. So this is integrating the knowledge to make it a little better. So conscience is unification, uniting. And knowledge is trying to reach that unification. Understanding is what we perceive from a lower level, from a lower point of view, from the past towards the future. It's going there, but we have to receive it at the same time. And receiving, we have all the instruments. I don't need to build the instrument. I ask the insect, I ask the animal. He has got wonderful antennas, that insect. So I'm asking him, could you please tell me if this substance is harmful or not? And what does the insect do? It shall react, it shall tell you. It's no great big science. This is understanding. Look at it.
Okay, thank you, Jedi. That's some good ideas and concepts there. Anybody else have any input on that? I think you've left them stunned, Jedi.
There's so much with an experiment, having the proper instruments and materials.
No, I hope not. I mean it's just following the stream. This is something we all know, but we do not practice it. It's primitive. It's something we just have to respect nature before trying to make a mess. We are forcing every time we are forcing things in our direction. It's interfering. We should respect the what's given, and at the same time work and make it better. If you have a possibility, just make it better. It's Aladdin's lamp. Watch it. It's polishing it all the time. It's a diamond. You have to fine polishing this diamond. You obtain that light.
I wonder if his lamp was nano-coated copper sometimes, or brass.
Yes.
And maybe the act of polishing actually helps create the nano layers in a certain way, similar to these discs.
And the act of polishing is caressing, and those who caress, they understand, because they are respecting such an infinite dimension. It's so small, but they are polishing it. So it's like working on the soul. You respect everyone. You come to respect food because it is a living entity. So it's not food anymore. You understand that is alive. And you even understand that this limit of living and non-living is again some kind of concept that is something someone told us. But the mountain is alive and it's moving. It's like a wave. It's moving. It's only the only difference is that you should take a time lapse of 2 million years, and you would see the mountains just moving like water waves. But it takes a time lapse, 2 million years time lapse. So with a time machine, you can do it, and you can see this. Or using your conscience and consciousness is beyond all this. This is a limit of a matter state. We want one, and so there is a contract. We want it. It's mine. Let's say the problem is our hand when you don't caress anymore and we start grasping. We want to own. That is, it's mine. So it's private. And that moment, by introducing something that is yours, and so it's not shared anymore, that is introducing another concept, which is scarcity, even if you don't mention it. So that is poverty. Just follow the line. It's a karmic line. And poverty, and so you can carry on. Once you understand where you go wrong, you go back and you start again, calculate. Now I find, that was the mistake. Okay, I correct it. So it's polishing the lamp. That is the candle light, probably. It's the idea of meditating on that fundamental kind of energy, and so we use this as a symbol. Everyone uses it as a symbol. It's the symbol of transmutation, and this flame is what produces this kind of sublimation. So we use incense to purify. I mean, a tree creates this kind of substance, which is a gans. And if I free this gans, this will send in the air, in the environment, thousands of substances. It's as simple as this, and that is it's feeding, it's energy. And so even if the forest burns up, the sublimation of all this kind of energy is going to build the fields to regenerate itself. And the ashes are going to carry on with this kind of transmutation with water. So we are playing with our little bowl, plates, metals are there, energy flowing, and that is life again. It's just taking a picture, not from one point of view. It's changing a perspective. This is what happens when you bend it, you curve the mirror. The focus could go towards a very tiny point, and so that is understanding details. But if on the other side, the mirror would expand vision 360 degrees. So we got stuck in this inverse image of ourselves in front of a mirror. And so we couldn't get the right image of what is happening, because we are dealing with ourselves most of the time. Once you curve it, the mirror is now, it shall give you a different length, a different image. That's a way to see things. From another point of view, it's like every different animal, insect, has different eyes, different length. It's wonderful. 20 eyes, 200 eyes. They see magnetic. They see electric. They see. So what has all this got to do with our vision? We still believe we have a perfect vision. Now get an infrared camera.
That's what the doctors say. 20/20 vision. You have perfect human vision.
Human.
Right.
That is the problem.
A dog has better vision than most humans.
It has 17 times our nose. So
Yeah.
what does that mean? I mean, a creature in the sea, it could taste the sea from a distance of 1,000 miles, and just taste that you jumped in the water. That is understanding the fields. And so it's accepting that already exist instruments of this very profound perceptions that are there, and you can build other instruments, even organic instruments. When I say that it is a sponge, what I saw, it's a sponge. It's quasi-crystals. They would create living entities at this kind of level. And so you could ask that entity, would you please tell me if there is something wrong with the water that I am drinking, because I am drinking the water that comes from this lake, and maybe someone threw in it something that is not really. And so this very tiny creature, the algae, it's going to tell you, oh, there is some very, very toxic substance and it's there. So how did the alchemists do this? You get the algae, you dry them up, you make a dust powder of them, then you burn it, and then you smell. The scent of the substances is reaching your nostrils. And two different beings, and they are connected by this transmutation of the elements and the understanding of the transmutation and what happens. So you don't need to use an electronic device. You can do it. Ask your dog. Dogs are able to find out everything from this point of view. Illnesses or even food. Just hide it away and he finds it. So it just, you have to address the question to the right kind of being, and he's going to answer. He's going to give you the answer. But your conscience has to be there, because you shall not respect nature. Never. If you carry on transforming all this into a matter state level, and so creating disorder, it's already there. but we don't allow ourselves to work together with nature, with other beings. So how could we possibly go out of this galaxy into another one and say, oh, we are very glad that we welcome you, come to see us, and our level of understanding, it's not there. It's not there. We don't even understand the creatures that live in this world. We do not respect them. And we want to build instruments to go somewhere else. Are we going to create the same kind of Mayan, or just introduce chaotic understanding somewhere else?
The
Yes,
thing
go
to
on.
experiment would be like the indigenous people that use an eagle's eye to be able to see far away.
Perfect. That's the way. And you don't need to really interfere with it. It's your conscience that is expanding to its level, and so you are asking. And once your understanding, well, not the right word. Once your spirit matches that kind of tuning, you don't need anymore to say to your dog, do this and do that. You are moving together. And this happens all the time. So you just meditate and you are flying and you see. But if you are using human eyes, you shall never understand that eagle use a double kind of zooming eye, and it's something that we cannot understand. Maybe nowadays with a zoom, and we could. So it has a picture of a tiny bird flying in the forest, and it has a picture of a complete size, a wide vision. At the same time, it's aiming to that detail until the two images match. It's a double vision. We don't even own this vision.
Or use a fly's eye, which has hundreds of eyes in it.
Yes, that's another way. It's by, and this is just considering eyes. And so here's, we could put two electrodes in the seawater, one in the North Pole, one in the South Pole, and listen. You're using the oceans now. That kind of a microphone, that kind of antenna could reach far, very distant signals by using a planetary understanding, the concept of the antenna of the totality of the beings, and would match that frequency, would match other worlds of our kind. So it would match creatures that live within our range. It's just meditate, just let it go. Do not try to own it, to possess it. It's by letting go, it's sharing. So you enter the Pantarei, it was called, the flux. It's by going from Vipassana to Shamatha. It's by practicing techniques that allow you even imagination has its own field. Just let it free. Once you can discernment, it will tell you what you have imagined and projected and what is coming from the other side. So this could not possibly be me because I have no knowledge of this kind. I do not speak that kind of language. I do not own that knowledge. So where is it coming from? And so just listen. And there is polishing. And this polishing the stone, it will create the diamond. And the diamond is, in our dimension, perfection. In our crystalline dimension. Although we believe things are in all mixed up, and we say this is the animal, this is the tree, this is so there are different reigns and domains, but they all belong. It's like saying atoms are within every living creature. We understand this. Every living doesn't necessarily have to be a creature from your point of view. It's every living.
Every soul. You would connect soul to soul, and you'd telepathically receive all the information, be it a tree, be it an atom, be it whatever.
Yes, you would receive. Soul probably is so deep as a concept, we could use spirit, saying that we are working on this particular dimension now at this time, this moment. Soul is the vastity of the soul is so great that we couldn't possibly reach it like this, because being beyond our natural, let's say, cultural limits, it would harm us, because it's like Icarus going towards the sun. Ask for your dimension. Once you're ready, you don't need to ask. You shall reach it. But those who want to force their dimension, and so you want to put 2 liters in a 1 liter bottle. What's wrong with you? And this is this is a never-ending process of densification. Let's say we want more. Matter wants more. So it's like some sort of black hole. It's just sucking all the energy, and from the seed that created that hill nest. So we free the seed, and so equilibrium is there. This level is probably missing. It's not the soul. We cannot reach the soul as easily. We should just to start with work on your conscience and within the spirit, and move towards the soul, the dimension of the soul.
Jedi, what is for you? What is the difference between the concept of soul and spirit?
I shall write a chapter on this, and next couple of weeks. I shall give you the different points of view that we have reached within the stream of time.
Is it in level?
Shaktipat. If I start saying words that sound really strange to you, and speaking, you know, there would be no point in doing this, because it's like trying to explain. A nuclear physicist is trying to explain something to a child, and you have to use the right words. And the right words are not even in our language, because it has been transformed into an instrumental kind of process that has nothing to do with nature anymore. It is something connected with intent. And so those who have been governing the field, their intent placed this kind of understanding in our cortex, let's say. We know things are in a different way, but we cannot explain, we cannot reach it, because we are just working with the cortex. And because we have introduced concepts that belong to an intent of someone else that has been feeding our transmutation all along. Just think about the thumbs in your fingers. Now, people using a mobile phone, they have started using their thumb as we used to use our index. And they go so fast that you are astonished. How could this possibly be happening? This is something really strange. It's taking place because no one thought about ergonomy. They thought about a flat instrument and this surface, and so you have to write on it. There are no keys anymore. And this is transmutation, is transforming. And this is only a concept. We have introduced a device. Now there are 5 billion of them. And next generation, they shall not have a thick thumb. You shall see hands changing into 5 long fingers. You don't need to hold things anymore to pull to work. That's hard work. It's going to change. This is a consequence. So, same way, this intent created a language, and it forced our hand to become the way it is because of labor. And so we have to hold tight, very heavy instruments to survive. Understanding this, it gives us the opportunity to go back to the work you have to do, respecting your spirit within this incarnation. And the soul is there, but to reach it, you have to understand the gradients, what happens in between. It's the mirror was focusing only on a detail. And that, emotionally speaking, it's the ego. Once you understand this, and you say, okay, I I want to see things from the opposite side. And so you see that it's shining everywhere. So the three mirrors, the detail, the whole of the picture, and the mirror image that is a reversed one, these three are still three different kinds of illusion within the dimension of the spirit. But this kind of images, you need to understand what is beyond refraction. Because every kind of light that is going back and forth, this is speculation. It is speculative. It is a mirror. The ability to transmute something from one octave to the other, this is something that we have to learn. It takes time. Then you can produce the instrument to reach it. Once the idea, once the concept, once the dimension of it is there, it shall manifest itself. So it's by introducing this technology that we have just changed our thumbs, not considering all of our material being that has already been transformed by substances, devices. Your left leg should be a little longer if you drive a car, maybe 1 or 2 centimeters. So it's like playing tennis. Your right arm would grow. It's forcing nature to follow some other path. And a violin player, a musician, he would go to the chiropodist to ask him for a massage because he has problems to his back. And this happens to the flute player, and this happens to every man that is practicing art or working, and there is something wrong with the instrument itself, with the position you are assuming. So mind is exactly the same, and the picture is that someone is giving you the instruments. If these instruments are not good ones, you created a mess. You don't understand a thing. You lose the picture. It's going back to a meditative state of rest and silence that we should all practice, and to find equilibrium and harmony within, not missing. That is the concept of scarcity. I said someone, inception, that someone just planted there, and so the plant is there, it's in the garden. Understand that you don't miss, you own, you have, without owning. It's given, it's free. Then we can build mirrors, whatever. I used to burn sails with them. I guess that the people in Alexandria, they were disturbed by the light. They were disturbed. They couldn't sleep because there was this bright light moving around. Now we are facing screens 5 hours, 10 hours a day. Ultraviolet light. What is our body going to do? It's the body is going to react to this frequency, creating illness, because it has not had the time to build a protection against this forced light during the day and during the night. So it's burning our eyes. Everyone is losing sight. And conscience is not there. And we are not changing the frequency. But we are all wearing glasses. So this is the story of the thumb. And now we are doing this with our eyes. Now we are doing this with our ears. And so we do not respect not only other beings and creatures, animals, whatever, but we are abusing of our limited perfection, damaging it. I believe that sciences have to meet those who are into the spiritual fields or trying to understand the soul. They have to meet together and they have to work very hard to reach this respect and to integrate the knowledge.
What happened to the indigenous people that were taken to Vietnam and they cut their hair and they lost all their quality of detecting strange people or whatever.
Yes, and that is not only because of the cutting the hair, but it is because someone placed them in another environment. So they did not resonate with that frequency anymore. So they lost their identity in some way. So this process, either by taking someone, forcing that individual to go somewhere else, or changing the entire environment around it's where he lives, this would create this loss of understanding and fine-tuning that you have with nature. So this is why someone has been working upon eradicating or canceling the word biodiversity, which is natural and which is something that you should respect. And so once this concept is not there anymore, they are free to mix things up. And where intent wants to open the same kind of supermarket or whatever, it will start cloning this entity everywhere and changing the field itself, changing the food, changing tradition, changing this change. How do they call it? This is the concept of subversive. We cannot even speak or pronounce this word. But once you change a natural order into an organized disorder, scientifically speaking, because it is very well disorganized, and conscience is not there to be present, and discernment is not acting, and things go bad way, and then it's not a surprise. That's why I say you go and ask that insect. He has wonderful antennas, and he shall give you the answer. So concentrate your study efforts and sciences to listen rather than to replicate and build a new submarine with a dolphin skin. What's wrong with you? Next time you will be a dolphin. You will incarnate in a dolphin and you see the difference. This is mimicking. You're not yourself anymore, you're mimicking. And sciences are doing exactly this, are mimicking, copying, monkeys. And conscience is not there. So once you have this mutual language, you are able to even, let's say, from telepathy, call it like this, telepathy, and you can fine tune with your dog, with the cat, with the animal, and ask him, and he's going to answer. He might have something to say, and you would never allow him to say what he wants. What he believes is the truth that he's receiving, that he knows. Because we have placed ourselves on top of the pyramid. And so we are the only ones to explain and to own, in fact. It's not very wise. Every 1,000 of years, a dragon wakes up and then it just scratches his back and then it goes back to sleep. So we should respect beings that are, in fact, there. But we cannot see them. We cannot see them. We cannot even imagine them. We have names from the ancient past, the elders. They gave us names of these entities, beings, creatures. We should respect that dimension too.
Okay, that's good advice, Jedi. Thank you for your input. Is there anyone else that would like to weigh in? Has it sparked anything in anyone, or have something else you need to bring up?
So many ideas crop up. Yeah, it's incredible. So many paths we can experiment in.
John Keane, you want to go ahead? Not able to hear you yet. Your microphone's open, but don't hear any voice yet. Oh, something happened.
Can you hear okay?
Speak up a bit. I think so. Go ahead.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Great. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Rick. Yeah, hi guys. Sorry, headset's not right. Yeah, just reflecting on some of what Jedi was saying then in terms of dimensional relationship. That's what some of the stuff I've been looking at myself over a while, and basically trying to put some kind of aspect on the Merkaba being like the star formation and how your reactors are formed and the rest of it. But basically, I feel that is a reflection of the fourth dimensional construct that we're currently experiencing or currently have consciousness of and understanding through the ancients and the different frequencies that were used in like Sophigo, balancing of the chakra and the energy points. And basically feel that we're moving as the planet's shifting from third to fifth dimensional relationship, and the pyramids of Giza being the half of the icosahedron, that was fourth dimensional technology, and where I believe the planet has probably been infiltrated through that. So looking beyond that, I'm considering that there's like a multidimensional Merkaba system within our souls, and potentially used on the technology side, whether we look at the reactors and the rest of it. Basically, to me, the Merkaba that we currently know is a representation of projection points of 4D onto a 3D plane, which generates your 7 main chakra for us to interact on this plane with a soul and take human being form. So I believe we're evolving beyond that, and we are integrating new chakra into our system, and new consciousness is lifting. And this is why we're having these type of discussions, because we're advancing our thoughts, our desires, dreams. We are getting shown stuff at different levels and through meditation and probably dream state. And it's about interacting and bringing that onto, I don't know, the platform, but changing the platform, which changes everything. We go from a linear to a quantum structure when we're talking into this, these additional dimensional aspects. Now I've done some geometry, which I've found interesting, basing it on a 5D structure, the pentagon. And one thing I did find was when I modeled the structure, that when they were interlocked like a Merkaba and shifted through the corresponding angles, 36 degrees, that when you measured the points of the opposing 5 points, if you will, I've got something I can show, but I don't want to show anything too sensitive. But it actually, the dimensions of center points and balance creates the perfect it recreates the equilateral triangle within it, and so it's linking and overlaying what we currently know. This is where the light body, I feel, or the integration. It's an integration. It's not a shift from physical into non-physical.
into the higher, spirit body or soul body. It's actually integrating the physical and soul over the top of the physical. This is how I see it, where this is where you'll emanate a light body around your physical body, and you'll maybe show your halo, your Christ consciousness sphere around your head. And I'm just talking through experience, because I've seen light beings as a child, and that's how they looked. They looked like they were beings with space helmets on, and at the time, and I saw the craft, and basically at the time I thought they were like spacemen with needing space helmets to be on our planet and breathe our atmosphere, our air. And air to me is fourth dimensional, because it that's what it represents. So that's some of the, just a rough outline of where I'm coming from, but I know we can maybe assist, and I've been trying to put it together, because it evolves beyond there. There's like overlay upon overlay of bodies, like the planet shows its physical crust, and then you have your atmosphere, and then you'll have your ionosphere and your magnetosphere, and now we're getting the new belt that's being beyond the Van Allen belt, the new this is what's happening to the planet. The planet's got these layers of energy, and yeah, it's all valid and ties in with MTK's philosophy of gravitational magnetics, but this is the overall picture I'm coming from. So I don't know, any of your thoughts on that? Does any of that make any sense to people?
Well, for one thing, some esoteric teachings say that we don't have just a physical body. We actually have 7 bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So the physicality is just one of those bodies. And if you think about it, we have an emotional body. Where is that? It's somewhere sort of inside of our body, but is it really? And then there may be astral body, or ethereal body, or light body, or plasma body, or but some of the ancient teachings will talk about the 7 bodies of man. So it's a matter of perspective, a matter of dimension. Which dimension do you wish to hang out in? Is just sort of like that old saying of what you see is what you get. Because if you're seeing in the 5th dimension or higher dimensions and seeing some picture of the totality, then that'll be, it could be the exact same place on the planet that someone else is looking out and just seeing maybe a building with a street, and someone else is seeing into a whole other dimension with other beings, and things are zipping in and out of the space and so on. So it's a matter of the matter, what we decide to look at, what are we able to look at, what are we trained to look at, in a way too. Yeah. And some of that training is involuntary, and some of it is voluntary. Sometimes you have to voluntarily train yourself to untrain the ways of viewing things as what we call normal, in order to detach from that identification with what's in front of us, or different ideas that have been put in our heads, or different concepts, or all the different things that we get attached to as humans. So there's different ways of approaching the whole concept, as Jedi was laying out as well.
Yeah, sorry, I missed. I only caught the last 15 minutes of missing most of what was said before. But yeah, I think the planet's vibrational rate is also a reflection of what's possible to see, or what technology is available for people to tap into, because we drop down frequencies and we've come from a higher place, and that's where the ancients were. They were at a fourth dimensional consciousness with the DNA more activated, and we've dropped down into the lowest of 3D, and we're now working our way back up. But the planet's choosing to exist in a fifth dimensional state. So I feel we should be tapping into that sort of.
Well, yeah, I can understand that. But in a way, if you could look at it that in relation to the past, we are like gods. You know, all of us have, for example, if you were a god in the past, you might have 100 horses under your control. And by gods, they meant basically the rulers at that time, who considered themselves to be gods, and population considered them to be gods. They would have maybe 100 horses, and to have 100 horses would be unheard of, because it would be so much manpower required to maintain all the horses and corrals and stables, and all the training and all that kind of stuff. And only a king or a god could have that much horsepower. And now your average car has double that amount of horsepower, and it's available immediately on your right foot as soon as you push on the throttle pedal, sort of thing. And the old days, to have a chariot with 20 horses would be quite a big deal. It would be, a 20 horsepower chariot was pretty big. And now we have motorcycles with 10 times that amount of power literally at your fingertips. It's a different world now, and we would be considered gods. We talk to people on the other side of the world routinely. I mean, how would you do that 1,000 years ago? You would have to do it through your own instant communication, system and so on. But that may have been superior in many ways, and that's sort of from a higher dimension. But on the other hand, I think we're moving toward and moving beyond those previous powers and previous supposed higher beings and so on, most of which, when you actually look at their lives on Earth, they probably wouldn't be the living example of the best human beings a lot of the time. So maybe, we have this dreamy vision that things were really better in the past and these masters really had it together. But I don't know if that's really true or not.
There's quite a bit of knowledge coming out now about, we had this technology not only 300 years ago when it was Tartaria, and when there were all these ancient structures that are all around the world have been kind of covered up. We believe history's been rewritten through the, I don't know, the takeover of the planet, and that's what.
There's lots of knowledge that's been, say, lost in the past, or covered up, or just forgotten about, because people changed. And when it comes right down to it, most people aren't really interested in the knowledge of the soul, and about detaching from the ways of the physicality and looking more toward a higher viewpoint and of the totality and so on. Most people are here for the fun of being on planet Earth, and to experience all the to identify with and experience the joys and toys on planet Earth, right? but others are here for other reasons, to evolve and to help others evolve and to voluntarily engage in that act of elevation and evolving. So I don't know, there's different strokes for different folks, and maybe not everyone has the same intention of landing on this planet.
Just considering what with like Jedi in here saying that, I'm considering in terms of like Star Wars, what dimensional aspect or consciousness do we think that perceives? We're classing that in 4D. You know, this is that what's imagined exists or has existed. That's what we can say, that if you can imagine it, it's possible. So, and you know, they said that for like Star Trek, they channeled the Syrians. Roddenberry channeled through used some mediums to channel Syrians to get all his ideas. And I don't know about Lucas, but for Star Wars, you know, the information's been channeled about what their abilities were at that time and what the technologies were in those star systems. And I believe that's what is around us now. I believe that
Sure, that's been around for decades and actually for hundreds of years. There was a convention, back in, I think it was 1980 or so. It was called The Secret Teaching Behind Star Wars. And that was, when did Star Wars first come out? Somewhere in the early 80s, I guess, right?
late 70s, yeah.
Late 70s, early 80s. And that was the topic of this, one of the panels on this, in this convention. Secret teachings behind Star Wars. And you're right, there was a lot of influence in the different science fiction genre videos and movies and so on, right from day one, from the science fiction writers and from the various shamans and priests of the written word that helped develop out these plots and different ideas and so on. And yes, some of that information can be channeled or downloaded from those that are mediums or shamans. That's kind of what they do, have done for millennia. It's just that a lot of the time they aren't well received by the general population, so they have to hang out in a protected way sometimes, or you know, get involved with a TV series where anything goes, and that way you don't get ostracized or burned at the stake as you might have in the older days. Yeah. You can imagine some of the early witches. I've got this great idea for a movie. Burn her at the stake. Burn her. You know, it's just not okay to disrupt the population with new ideas on a lot of topics in the old days. So in a way, again, we're able to have access to so much more general knowledge as humans now than we did in the past, and we can get that information quite quickly if there's an earthquake on the other side of the world, or if there's some calamity that happens, or even the weather that's coming up days ahead that we have now. Of course, in the old days they probably had it weeks ahead, but we think we're doing it better now anyway.
Yeah, very good. But just going back to how we're progressing with the reactors on you know, the technology side, is there still the issue with blowing out substations and things and controlling the plasma at all? Is that still valid? The, you know, to ground it or contain it, because if you, from my belief or outlook of what we're dealing with, if you're trying to create well, it's not artificial plasma, but it's not by natural order. We're trying to use our minds to create these devices to create such powerful plasma sources. Then do we need to take the responsibility of doing that within a containment that is of a higher field, and like a sun or a star or a birth of a child or a baby, you know, the inception, that's a natural course of nature. So we're to consider, I think, potentially
I think for 99.9998% of the cases, don't worry about it. I've yet to see anyone produce a decent light or decent heat or decent power or any other manifestation that would cause any grief, you know, other than sometimes running reactor combinations can cause radio transmission, you know, problems. The radio might cut out, or your cell phone can cut out, and that kind of thing, depending on different voltages that are used and so on and so forth. But to actually cause that kind of feedback to blow out transformers blow out all the time. This is one of the big problems. One of the reasons that PG&E in California is just going bankrupt. That's the power company for California, the largest power company in North America, basically, I think. And they're having to go bankrupt because they're responsible for something like 1,500 fires in Northern California, one of which had burned down the town of Paradise. So they blow transformers all the time. Their trees fall on lines and it puts a surge back and the transformer blows. And that kind of thing can happen. Now, whether people are doing that with the magravs and so on, there might be certain testings that are going on that are creating such field interactions. It's entirely possible. And some of the early work that was done in the labs in Italy, and that was one of the things they would do, is you put a radio in the room and you leave the radio on all the time. And your cue or clue that your reactor combination is working is when the radio goes off. And that means the fields are interacting and the radio is no longer able to receive through the plasma field interactions. And that can extend out, you know, tens of meters or more. So that kind of thing can happen, and lots of different effects on other levels other than blowing transformers or blowing anything as far as that goes. More like blowing your mind, that you're able to contact someone on the others or connect with a reactor combination on the other side of the planet with your reactor combination in front of you, because you've gotten sensitive to the fields and you know there's a connection and so on and so forth. You can do experiments like that are literally mind-blowing in terms of those kind of results. But for most people that are experimenting with their reactor combinations, I don't think they have to worry about blowing up the transformer unless just don't cross the lines. You know, your input from your output from your outlet, household outlet, don't cross the lines, as I experimented with when I was a child, and I had this metal tipped wooden cane, and I stuck it into the socket of the light in my room to see what would happen. And the sparks flew, and then everything went dark in my part of the house. And I realized then I had blown a fuse. I learned from my father what blowing a fuse was, and not to do that again. But it was, yeah, that's crossing the streams, and it's not a good idea to do with voltages out there. That's a different thing. And that can blow transformers, but that's a different deal than maggraph or some other reactor. I would like to see some reactors that are capable of doing that. If people would show them blowing up your local transformer. That would be kind of fun, and you know, for a one-shot deal. I would advise everyone to. I don't want to have a rush of videos of, oh, here's their transformer in our neighborhood blowing up, and another one over here, another one over here. And I'll have to eat my words that people aren't experimenting with them like that. But I think, generally speaking, that's not happening.
No, it was more for MTK's. I know he's blown them up in the past with tests in China and different places. So I didn't know whether they were trying to develop that and whether they could, hold the power levels and that with what was going on with that interaction.
Well, one thing that does happen with the plasma environment, that if you connect to a sink, like something that starts absorbing the energy, then it increases the energy flow within the plasma. So basically, the amperage goes up when you have when you try to ground the plasma, or try to not to ground it exactly, but to pull power from it. Then it increases its power to accommodate. Sort of a self-powering situation would be the idea under the ideal conditions. And that's kind of a freaky idea, because that means if you do find a way to make that direct connection, then the power amperage, the current, could increase astronomically, and could be quite impressive, depending on the quality of the plasma. We kind of throw the word plasma around quite liberally, but if you look at the plasmas in terms of the density of the plasma, the actual substance, the energy of a plasma, you can have such power densities in a plasma that a tiny cube less than the size of the width of your hair can have the same amount of energy that would power the whole of North America for a year, is one estimate. So when you imagine that kind of power level and density of a plasma, and if you had like a sugar cube full, would be enough to power the world for hundreds of years. And you go, wow, this is incredible. That just to try to imagine that's even possible or conceivable is hard to imagine.
That's what they think, innit? That's what what's around us can power. A square cubic centimeter can power the planet, for days effectively. So we're sat in the energy, and basically, there's whistleblowers coming out about the secret space stuff over in the States that we're 1,000 years ahead. They've already been to the galaxy in 45 minutes, center of the galaxy, in craft and that, which they've been developing since the 30s, 40s. So I mean, the technology's there, it's out there, it's just being kept from us, which maybe may change in the very near future with what's going on, you know, with the indictment stuff and that over in the States. So with the Space Force announcement, they've already got that sort of technology. And have you heard of Dan Winter? He explains like impulse and warp drive and how it works and the like. And he actually backs up.
Yep, we had Dan in the plasma group or on the Knowledge Seeker one time, as I believe it was. Yep. I like Dan Winter's work. He's got some interesting things to present.
Yeah.
He's got the Therify plasma device that he has been working with the last few years now, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is a plasma tube. There's a couple of tubes, and you sit between them or put your knee between them or whatever, and it has the sort of the primary rays that are able to do to facilitate healing and so on, supposedly.
Mm. Yeah, he's got some good knowledge and good knowledge of like DNA and geometry and that. That's why I've take a broad range of angles to get a best perspective of the overall perspective of plasma and DNA and dimensional existence and geometry. Like,
she's got some great pictures for sure, and drawings and so on, which are really nice to get some sort of physicality handle, I guess, on these on what's basically an invisible world. I mean, if you look at it, it's like I discussed about transcribing in the last couple of groups, and the idea that a transcriber takes something that's invisible, which is the sound wave, the sound of or verbal message, say in the case of Mr. Keshe's words, which are invisible. We can't see the words, we hear them, but only if they're played. So in order to see the words, those invisible waveforms have to be transformed into light, well, something that absorbs lights, and we call it in black and white or print, in order for us to read it, to understand, to get a different kind of understanding through the impression of those words on the screen or paper or wherever it is, that it's more or less a black and white light, either from a light emitting screen like I'm looking at now, or a light reflecting piece of paper when I look down on my desk. Either way, it's turning something invisible into the visible, and that's kind of a cool way to look at it. So it's the same with many of our devices and so on. We strive to try to change these invisible fields, invisible plasmatic, magnetic, gravitational fields into something visible that we can that one of our senses can get a handle on, one of our so-called normal senses, vision or hearing or touch or so on, smell and taste. We have all these transforming tools, which we call our senses, and as Jedi brought up the interesting point of we can also use the tools of nature around us. That bug that's crawled into your experiment, perhaps that's the one that is telling you more about the experiment than all the fancy sensors that are attached to the experiment.
Yeah, yeah, I've witnessed that. I've had animal interaction around stuff and trying to point things out. That's how I try and follow. Nature shows you the way generally, and if you're on the right track or can stop you or warn you if you're not, and from different aspects of being out in nature if there's danger.
Yep, you hear a crow sometimes with a certain call, and it means a warning. It's
Yeah.
a danger call, and
That's
other
right.
things like other signs that you see with the animals or the
That's what we to
plants.
try and focus with. That's we're meant to be trying to reconnect with nature as well as our knowledge and technology in turn. Obviously, make technology into harmonious with the planet, and we can expand it to be super, sci-fi effectively. But it's just what you mentioned. I mean, one like alchemy and the rest of it with water. Water's the key. Water is just, we take it for granted, but it's a miracle, and it's when you take two gases and you can combine them and then create a molecule of water that is so much more times heavier than what the actual gas is. That's how the interaction of the gases then create a different gravitational effect on the field. And what is, the phi ratio, for instance, of how gravity is having an effect on the body, and we can change that. We should be able to. That's how the monks can levitate. They must be able to do this sort of thing with balancing the own energy body. So yeah, that's interesting. But any thoughts on, like, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, and create a body of water that's mass is so much, it generates the element that then becomes a much heavier. That's like, it doesn't make sense in linear terms anyhow, that's for sure.
Yeah, it just takes a spark for it all to happen. I know I've done it before, accidentally and deliberately, but in one case in particular, it was a big mess. But that's a good example of the gases coming together and making a heavier matter level kind of state, and something that's essential to life.
Yeah, well, there's kind of one theory that all, like, space at certain points is water. We're sat not in water itself, but like maybe water on a much higher dimensional field. That's what
the big joke about it to me is being I mentioned earlier, I was a spaceman when I was like 4 years old. Basically, the big joke to me is all of a sudden in the last few years, we're finding out that most, if not all, of the planets of our solar system, and probably most of the planets of the universe, have water on them. They always said that Mars never had any water, and the canals are just made by the wind, and so on and so forth. In fact, they laughed at Nikola Tesla, who was one of the first to come out and say that there were canals on Mars and that they were caused by water, and that there was water on Mars, on the poles, and so on. And everybody laughed, oh, no way, for decades, until suddenly we find out, whoa, there's actually water on Mars. And not only that, but there's actually a crater that's full of water in one point, and one of the poles, and so on and so forth. And the same with the moon. The moon is not supposed to have any water because it doesn't have any atmosphere, it would have all evaporated, blah, blah, blah. But yet they're finding water in the soil on the moon. And now recently, again, on Mercury of all places, the closest planet to the sun, apparently has a dark, it rotates slowly or something. And so it has a cold part that has, you guessed it, water, frozen water on it. I'm just going, this is ridiculous. How did we miss this for the last 50 years? And sure enough, I mean, there's nowhere on planet Earth, literally, where there's water that there's not life. Even when they make perfect distilled water in the lab, pretty much the instant that they make it, it starts to have various entities, microbes and so on, just start forming or are there already, or somehow. It's very, very difficult to have a complete clean space where there's absolutely nothing in the atmosphere. There's always particles, there's always things floating around. And the same with the oceans. Every single drop of ocean water is full of, like, every drop has something like 15,000 types of varieties of microbes and bacteria in it. And same goes with all the river water and all the water that comes from the sky, as we call rain. It's full of life. There's nowhere that there's what they just discovered life underneath the glacier of the Antarctic, and they drilled into this underground or under glacier, under a couple of kilometers, I think it was, of glacier, into a lake that they've never tested before, and sure enough, they found life in this lake that's completely buried. So it's everywhere, and we just have to admit that and just start gathering up some water samples from around our happy little solar system here, and see what kind of GANS water they make, I think. What kind of amino acids are going to come from the water from Mars? That would be interesting.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it seems like we've been misled from the truth, disinformation so much that it's hard for people's belief system to change. But, it is coming forward. I think that a lot of the truth will be coming out.
Well, this is, I think, the main theme for this year will be transparency. And there'll be lots of jokers trying to run their trip on the humans, but more and more we're finding out that we're looking at transparency. There's a new app that I just saw that's coming out. It's the Truth app, and it searches for whether someone in the news media is saying a true statement or not. And it searches in real time as they're talking. It's like a fact checker, facts, whether they're are they BSing us or are they telling us facts, basically. So we'll be able to tell right away when the politicians are there yakking away, and beside them will be the fact checker, and they'll go, beep, this is not correct, or beep, this is true, and blah, blah, blah. And with that kind of interaction with the AI, there's a possibility we might be able to use that as humans to make better decisions about what we're being told and what is really going on behind the scenes, and so on and so forth, because it'll become so transparent that immediately when people are speaking, it'll become obvious, both from our own intuition, which will become more fine-tuned as the whole totality is upgrading and changing, and also with the technology, which is also upgrading in technology. We've had face recognition everywhere. Everybody's going to have to be honest, because you can't get away with anything anymore. Go ahead, Jalal. I hear your voice there.
Good day, everyone. Sorry to jump in. I don't have time. You give, you receive more. if you are seeking for the truth, you need to give. As just Rick said, when you transcribe, you find something more because you give. So this is the meaning of giving, you receiving more. If you are seeking for a truth to come out, you give in the same kind, two plasmas of the same kind or similar. Always Mr. Cash said that. It's need only
good
understanding.
point. Yeah, it's a good point about the transcribing. It's an excellent example of you give and you receive from it. You receive so much from transcribing. It's hard to describe what you can get from it, and which a greater understanding is one thing.
You receive more. You receive more. That is, and this is the simple way you will understand this whole universe.
Yep. And if you don't believe it, just try it. You don't have to believe it. You just have to try it.
Are you coming today in the Caroline teaching?
Well, I'm usually too burnt out to do that, but
come after 5. I will show you something.
After 5, what time are you talking about? What local time zone?
Now
PM CET?
After 7 hours.
Okay.
I will show you something. You will not be astonished, but you will understand it more.
All right. Well, that's interesting. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.
And I note that anybody that's a KFSSI student would also be under that invitation, I presume. So let's look forward to that. Okay, I'm thinking I might like to wrap things up here, but if there's anybody that would like to carry on with more carrying on here, feel free.
This is Moshfegh. I wanted to give you a little update on the reactors I built.
Okay.
This is a very little thing, but I'm doing quite a few experiments, but this is one of the more tangible or physical manifestation of in a way.
Do you want the camera or a whiteboard or something?
No. I'll just briefly mention the result. This is more of a result than anything else. So the reactors are running. It's continuously running, and I think there is no diminishing of the field. So this is one of the things. And so our garage is about like 30, 40 meters from where the reactor is running. So I have these, the car has the coils on the battery. So, we have, I have several other reactors of like the spherical reactors, which the fields are connected for the plants. And we got some improvement of the car performance from that. But after I've started running the reactors, the car power and full efficiency has gone up quite a bit. And to the point that with just the coil, we are getting about 45% fuel efficiency and power improvement. And that's a lot.
You say you're getting a 45, you got a 45% increase?
It has doubled. Essentially, the fuel efficiency has pretty much doubled. The power is probably 45% more. So this is after I started running this reactor. A few weeks after that, we started noticing this. So, and I think it can, now I know how to increase it, but I don't think I want to do it because the car is already causing trouble for us. Because the battery terminals are corroding very rapidly because so much, I don't know how the power is being delivered, but the terminals they have to be cleaned regularly. And so this is one of the things we are noticing, but this is after I'm running the reactor, the one that I showed. Remember the one, you know which one I'm talking about. The one without the motor and without which created the fuel flow is created or the rotation is created by the plasma battery. So that one. So this is a sort of like a side effect of it. And there are other experiments, but I mean, this is more of a physical experiment. So, and
Okay.
I think it can be, the power can be increased even further, but I don't think I want to go there.
Well, that's interesting. You should maybe write that up for the testimonials or something there.
Where should I mean, should I write it as a testimonial? I don't know. I mean, I just thought that I mentioned it. But I have to explain the whole reactors. I don't know how I'm going to explain the reactors.
Yeah, right. Well, it depends on how far you want to go with it. If you find there's definite results and you can repeat them and you want others to, then it would be good to do a Plasma Scientific Journal entry on it and try to notate all the variables and so on and so forth, take some pictures and present it, and it might end up in the, it would end up in the Plasma Times. And the other way to do it is if you just want to do it quickly as a testimonial, you can go to the testimonials.keshefoundation.org and just fill in the form there. It's pretty quick and easy with any links you might have to a video or a picture, and send that off, and we can publish it in the testimonials and just keep it for posterity sake, that that to notate that this was done at a certain time frame.
Yeah,
so
probably I can refer to the video that we have. I mean, the time period when I presented it to this reactor group meeting, and that might be one way to do it, because then I can
well, that's actually a good way. I wanted to mention that it would be great to start indexing the plasma reactor group meetings. By that I mean having a timestamp for different topics that come up. Like today we had some interesting topics that came up. It'd be great to timestamp Jedi talking about soul versus spirit or something, whatever different things that came up, and with the time notated so that there'd be maybe 10 topics for each workshop, for each session, and they would have clickable direct links to the point in the video where that topic was being mentioned, and that could be put into the description of the video so anyone could click on them there, and we could have a list of all the plasma groups with all the topics in a clickable database that we could access and start working on getting the transcripts for the important topics. At least don't have to do all of the 3 hours of talking perhaps, but just the important parts that do come up, important ideas that we want to keep active and be something that's searchable, then it would be good to do. And that's something I meant to do for some time, but it's a bunch of work, and it's hard scrolling through the old videos to get the exact timings and so on and so forth. But if somebody was interested in that, I'd be into supporting that project as much as I can. I need help. Anyway, just wanted to put a plug in there about that. That goes for the Knowledge Seekers workshops as well, and that is slowly being gotten together, the indexing of the different topics that have come up over the last years in the Knowledge Seekers workshops, and as well as the transcribing, which is so important to do with that workshop. So anybody that's interested in doing transcribing for that would be greatly appreciated. You can get a hold of me or Flint or others.
Hi, Rick. Sorry. It's not better any knowledge seekers when they listen this workshop, no? Leave a commentary in the news. What topic understanding indexing. It's not only one or two person can making this. All making a little comment behind. I understand topics of plasma reactor of today. It's about 3 layer of, you understand what I mean?
Yeah, well, the indexing is not to impart our own understanding of it, is just to notate what was said or some of the key words that might have come up during the when the topic was introduced. And so that the idea is eventually to be able to search through Google or other search engines and immediately have those topics come up that are being discussed in the actual workshop. So that would be the idea. But people can have their own interpretation and could put that in just to notate this seemed to be the topics that were being discussed, and this seems to coincide with that or whatever. Sure, that can be part of it.
In this way, you are connect all the knowledge seekers because you see each point of view of the same topics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're making.
Yep.
Today I listen every words. I not understand a lot because I'm working and my mind is needed to somebody at the place. But when I listen this, I put in from the minute 29 of I don't know 50. It's about this topic. And leave one comment with time lapse. Perhaps somebody helping somebody.
Yep. Thanks for the suggestion, Dan. Everybody should index. Let's all index. Okay, I think maybe we should wrap things up for today. Anyone else with any last minute comments? Especially you, Jalal. Always like to get the last laugh in. That's okay. All right, well, let's wrap it up then for today. I appreciate everyone who came by and spent some time with the Keshe Plasma Reactor group today for Wednesday, January 23rd, 2019. And this is Rick Crammond, and out for today's session. Next teaching will be the 260th Knowledge Seekers Workshop. And that'll be on Thursday at 9 a.m. Central European Time. And invite everyone to catch that. I'm sure it'll be yet another blockbuster from Mr. Keshe. And we'll see what the latest news is from the Keshe Foundation at that time. All right, thanks everybody, and see you next time around.
Jalal is waiting for his 500.